Hello friends, for today's video I am continuing with my series about series. So these are bookend, end of the year style videos where I look back and assess everything I've picked up this year, decide what do I want to continue on with, what do I plan to DNF, what have I caught up with, how well did I do in my goal of trying to cut back on the amount of series that I'm in the middle of by actually completing those series. So I did do a whole video dedicated to series I'm DNFing. I did a whole video dedicated to series I've completed and gotten caught up with. So for today we're focused on series that I have started and plan to continue on with. I do want to make really clear in the video where I talk about series I completed and got caught up with that for those ones, we're talking about multiple entries into the series, as opposed to today, these are all going to be firsts in series where I do plan to keep going. Either they're backlist and I finally got around to the first one and thought, yes, I liked that, I want to keep going, or they're new fantasy releases where only the first installments are out, but I want to ensure that the series stays on my radar because I would like to continue on with those. If you're interested in the other two videos, I'll have them linked. Also, I would love to know, doesn't even have to be fantasy, doesn't have to be new, doesn't even have to be adult fantasy either. If you want to talk about different age ranges, that's fine. I just want to know what's a series you started this year that you absolutely not only plan to continue, but that even one book is enough for you to start recommending it to people. I would love to know. All that said though, let's officially jump into it. The first book I want to mention is probably the only one where I would say it is using the term series a little bit more in an abstract manner than the rest of these. The rest of these, it's pretty cut and dry that they're the first in a series, whereas this one, technically, but it feels a little different, and that would be Perdido Street Station. I read this as part of a book swap video with my husband because he is a big fan of Perdido Street Station, but neither of us has continued on with this just yet. He certainly likes Perdido Street Station more than I did. There were aspects of it that I really liked. There were aspects of it I really appreciated. But I wouldn't say it was a favorite of the year for me. However, I know that there are other books in this setting that China Miéville has written that are considered part of the series, even if they don't necessarily follow the same characters and the exact same plot lines. And I would be curious to see what other things he does within this world. And I know Sean's very curious as well. So this might be a future buddy read between the two of us. And it will be interesting also to see, because we have slightly different feelings about Perdido Street Station, it would be kind of funny if it swapped, where maybe if as we continue, maybe I like certain installments more than he likes them. Regardless though, Perdido Street Station is a series that I want to keep going with. After that, we have Riven World. The first book in this would be Stormglass. I quite liked this first installment. I felt like it was a little different than a lot of the other fantasy books I pick up, both in its world building, but also in its tone. I think technically this is appropriate for YA readers. I've seen it sold in adult fantasy. The protagonists are quite young, but I don't know that I would say this feels like it has to fall under one or the other. I think it can be read by a variety of different ages. Of course, that's true for a lot of books in general. But I think sometimes the labels make sense, and other times it feels like we got to put it somewhere, but technically it feels like it's best to just not label it in one age range or another. And I think that's true for this world. I've only read the first book in the series, and I quite liked it. I liked the main perspectives. The world is interesting to me. The tone is a lot of fun and kind of adventurous. And I do feel like there's a lot of room for the characters to grow within this, and it is kind of tackling, thematically anyway, certain injustices of your class differences, and actually having characters that come from these different classes, and the one specifically from the top. I think something that fantasy is kind of in right now is looking at characters that are at the top and how they wield their power and how power corrupts, and I love exploring those themes. But this one seems to be a character that is more so interested in understanding people that come from different circumstances than she does, because she knows she's probably on the path of having some kind of, you could say, political career from a young age too. And she has this awareness that, but I want to know. I don't know about people who live differently than me, and I want to know, because how else am I supposed to be able to lead individuals? And I like the idea of actually following a character that might turn out to be a good leader. So that's one of the perspectives. The other perspective is somebody who does come from not as good circumstances, and they do have the opportunity to be raised in a family that makes their life easier when it comes to their material needs being met, but there is still a lot of mystery, and there's a lot of interesting things that happen and transpire around that character as well. So you're kind of seeing the ways that their paths are going to come together. And I quite like that first one, so I plan to continue on with this. Next up, we have The Counselor. This was quite politically driven, and I liked it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite political intrigue-heavy story, but I am a sucker for political fantasy, so I enjoyed reading this one. I did a in-depth review for this one over on Patreon if you're interested in hearing more about it. But regardless, technically it would seem it's the first in the series. You can read the first one almost as if it's a standalone, though it feels like there's more to the world, and from what I understand, the author plans to write more. I just don't know if we've seen it coming out. I don't know if there's something going on in the author's personal life, or if it has to do with kind of a publishing hiccup, I'll call it. I'm not really sure, but no currently second book in sight right now, but it is listed as the first in the series. And if a sequel were to come out, I would want to check that out. After that, we have a backlist series where I finally started the first book in the series. And I not only liked the first book, but now I'm kind of excited because there's a lot of books within this series. And then, I'm trying to remember. My friend told me, and I'm forgetting now. I think there's 2 other series within this world. But the first one would be Poison Study. I would say this was a former BookTube darling. I remember hearing people talk about the Poison series, or I think the series is called the Study series. The first book being Poison Study, of course. I would see a lot of people talking about how they really liked this one, and I think it was something a lot of people read when they were teenagers, or it was sort of that earlier 2000s fantasy that immediately I feel like the trends shifted away and started doing other things with, but that some people kind of miss this era of fantasy. And it was one of those where I'd had it on my TBR for so long that I was afraid that by the time I got around to it, that because I feel like the trends have changed, I would either come back to it and be like, oh, I wish this was still how fantasy was, or I would come to it and be like, I'm kind of glad we moved away from this. And there are pieces of it that feel like it was written slightly before, but at the same time, I do still have that feeling of, oh, I kind of wish we had more books like this. So I liked this one quite a lot. I am excited to see where it goes from here, and it is that great feeling of when you like something and there's so many other books in the world. That's always such a good feeling, so I am excited to keep going with this series. The next 3 I'm going to mention are ones where it wasn't even a question about whether or not I was going to continue on with these series. I absolutely was, and either I'm upset I don't have the sequels right now, or I'm upset that I didn't get around to the sequels, at least at the time I'm filming this. Maybe between filming this and the actual end of the year, I will continue on. But those 3 would be the Nampashawayazit, the first book being To Shape a Dragon's Breath. We also have The Great Silence, the first book in that one being Grave Empire by Richard Swan. And then we also have Gale Song, the first book being Children of Gods and Fighting Men by Shauna Lawless. That's the one that I am upset that I have not had the chance to continue on with it. I had a lot of other stuff on my TBR. This was one that I actually hadn't had on my TBR at the beginning of the year. And when I did pick it up, I was like, okay, when I checked it out from the library, I was like, okay, I'll get around to this one. And I picked it up, and I wanted so bad to drop everything and continue on with it. And I only let myself do that one time this year, and that was Talon Sister. But that was because I had kind of wanted to read Talon Sister and Titan Child this year since the duology was out, and I was like, oh, okay, the whole reason I didn't pick up Talon Sister right when it came out is because I knew Titan Child was going to come out not too long after, and I figured I'll just wait till they're both out and then read the whole duology, which is what I did. Whereas with Gale Song, the first book kind of ended up on my TBR this year, and then after reading the first book, the next 2 ended up on my TBR, and I just didn't have a chance to get around to it. Like I said, if I can, I would still like to try before the end of the year. Point is, though, I loved it. It was fantastic. I've consistently said since reading it, it's one of my favorite historical fantasy books I have ever picked up. I've heard it gets better and better. I can't wait. I know there's the new release that is also within this world, and I really want to get around to that one. So this is very high up. It's not just that I plan to continue. It is very high up on my TBR. And then The Great Silence to Grave Empire by Richard Swan. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I read it earlier this year. Have talked about it pretty much ever since. Fantastic. Probably one of the best when it comes to writing horror fantasy. I think it's great, and I can't wait for that next one. And then, of course, Shape of Dragon's Breath. One of my favorite books of this year. So good. Actually was a recommendation from all of you. This is why I'm always, I guess from a very selfish standpoint, wanting recommendations, because sometimes you give really good ones and I end up falling in love with these. So To Shave a Dragon's Breath was one of those. I absolutely loved it. It was actually part of a video I did where I had two of my friends recommend books to me that they thought I was genuinely going to enjoy. Patrons recommended books to me, a book to me, and then all of you picked. And that was the one all of you picked. And I think it was the winner. I really liked Dragon Mage, which is not on this list only because while I think that Dragon Mage is planning on having a sequel, currently it's kind of like the situation with The Counselor. There's no sequel in sight just yet, or at least the last time I checked. And you kind of can read it as a standalone. But if we get more, that is another one that I'm planning to continue this year. Or I plan to continue that I picked up this year. Point is, though, that of that video I did, that To Shave a Dragon's Breath was probably my favorite. There were some pretty good recommendations, though, and I was very lucky that a lot of you gave me great recommendations overall. But I really think more people need to pick up this one because it's so good and it's very underhyped, and the sequel comes out in January. So if there's a time to pick it up, it's now, so that you can read it in December and then you can read the second one in January. I think it's going to be more than 2 books, though, so then you'll have to wait. But we can wait together. I'm so excited for it. Anyway, moving on now. The next couple that I'm going to mention are fantasy romance, which is less of what I tend to gravitate toward. However, I am still open to checking out fantasy romance, and on occasion I find ones that I think are a lot of fun. And this is a particular series that I thought was pretty fun. So we have The Book of Blood and Roses. Technically comes out in January. I read an arc of it and I thought it was really fun. And it was both fun and stupid on purpose, which was a combination that I wasn't sure I was going to like, but then I did like it, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was very entertaining, so I do plan to continue on with that one. We also have the Siren Mage. I quite liked this one. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I actually liked the chemistry between the couple. I am not trying to say that it is good because it's not like other girls. It's not like other fantasy romance books. I'm not saying that. I just do think that right now we're seeing a certain kind of couple. It feels like kind of copy and paste in a lot of fantasy romance books, and it ends up feeling like I'm reading a version of the same thing a lot of times, and that's not really what I'm looking for. And this one, it didn't necessarily feel like that. It felt slightly different from what we typically get, and I didn't feel like we had that overly possessive love interest that seems very popular and on trend. That wasn't really the love interest in this one. And I was like, how refreshing. So I appreciated not having that. And I also just liked the pacing and the world building as well. That's it, though, for some series that I started this year that I plan to continue on with. If you are interested in seeing the other 2 videos, series I'm DNFing and series that I caught up with, or that I completed, then I'll have those linked in the description bar. As I said at the beginning, if there's anything that just the first installment is good enough that you are now recommending this to people, let me know what that is. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.